Welcome back! This is video number 2 in a series where we talk through our complete process for creating Ultimate Frisbee highlight videos. There are links in the description if you want to go back and watch from the start or jump to another video. In this video, we're going to be talking about all of the camera gear that we use and the camera gear that we recommend for filming Ultimate Frisbee highlights. We're going to talk through what cameras and lenses we use, what style of tripod we use, and all of the other small bits of equipment that we find useful. So let's start with the camera. There are lots of different types of cameras out there, but for filming Ultimate Frisbee highlights we use DSLR cameras or mirrorless cameras. Don't worry if you don't know what these are. The important thing to know is that we use consumer digital photography cameras with interchangeable lenses. I'm not saying you can't use other styles of camera, but these cameras work really well for a few different reasons. Firstly, because these cameras have interchangeable lenses, you can put on a zoom lens. And that lets us get really close to the action, which is really important for filming Ultimate Frisbee highlights. Secondly, this style of lens, which allows you to twist to zoom, means that you can quickly and accurately change the zoom level, which is essential for tracking the play. If you're looking to buy or borrow a camera to film Ultimate Frisbee highlights, here's a list of things that I recommend looking out for. Firstly, obviously, it needs to be able to record video. And ideally, it needs to be able to record video at a higher frame rate so that you can slow down the clips when editing. Because all those sick highlights look way better in slow motion. Most DSLRs and mirrorless cameras these days can shoot at 50 or 60 FPS, which is enough for what we do, but if you can source a camera that can film even faster, that's a bonus. If you're not sure what all that means, don't worry, we'll be talking about frame rates more in the next video. One thing that's not strictly necessary, but I would highly recommend, especially if you're new to sports videography, is a camera that can continually autofocus while filming. As the disc moves, it needs to be kept in focus, and that's a lot easier if your camera can do that for you. Like I say, it's not strictly essential, and some people might prefer not to use autofocus, but it's definitely worth it to have the option, especially if you're learning. Another thing that's not essential, but makes it a lot easier, is having a flip-out screen, something like this. Being able to adjust the screen angle makes it a lot easier to find a comfortable filming position, which isn't essential, but it makes life a lot nicer when you're filming for hours on end. One last thing that might be worth considering, depending on when you plan to film, is how well the camera copes with low light conditions. Often the Ultimate that we film is played outside during the day, which means there's plenty of light to go around. But if you're planning on filming lots during the night or in the evening under lights, you might want to consider how your camera will cope with less light. A good camera won't work without the right lens to go with it, and for filming Ultimate Frisbee highlights, the most important lens to have is a zoom lens. This lets you zoom in and get close to the action even when the disc is on the other side of the field. We use Canon's 75 to 300mm lenses, which work really well. If you're unfamiliar, the larger the number, the more the lens zooms in. So a focal length of 75mm looks like this, and a focal length of 300mm looks like this. A zoom lens is the most important lens, but it's not the only lens that you need to film Ultimate videos. As well as capturing highlights, it's also good to capture all the other stuff that happens around the game. Cheers, spirit circles, spirit games, all that good stuff. You can capture all this stuff with a zoom lens, but it's also good to have a wider lens that you can put on, which will make things a bit easier. One of my go-to lenses for filming this type of thing is a Canon 18 to 55mm lens. Having a wider lens means that you can get more in frame, and it also makes it easier to film smoother handheld shots. More on that in video 5 of this series. It's also a bonus if the second lens has an aperture that can open really wide, because that means that you can create blurrier backgrounds if that's a look that you're going for. The next thing that you'll need to film Ultimate highlight videos is a tripod. Shooting with a tripod makes it way easier to get smooth, steady footage, especially when shooting with a zoom lens. The most important thing that our tripods have is a 2-axis fluidized tripod head. Let's break that down a little bit. The head of your tripod is the bit that allows your camera to move, this bit here. So when I say 2-axis tripod head, I mean a tripod head that moves in the pan direction, like this, and a tripod head that moves in the tilt direction, like this. This means that I can point the camera in any direction that I want, but the camera stays level, which is important. One other common type of tripod head is a ball tripod head, which is great for photography, but they're not great for filming Ultimate because they still allow the camera to pan and tilt, but they also often will allow the camera to roll, which is not what we want. They're also often not fluidized, which is really important. A fluidized head is really the key to smooth movement. A fluid or fluidized tripod head will provide an even amount of resistance when you try and move it. That means that you can dial in the right amount of resistance so that the camera moves smoothly and the tripod head removes any shakiness from your hands. Probably the easiest way for me to demonstrate what a fluid tripod head does is like this. If I put the camera on the tripod, and then I lock the tripod off, and then I take my hands away, the camera stays where it is, which is what you would expect. If I unlock the tripod and remove all resistance, you might expect the camera to fall down quickly, but instead what happens is this. The camera falls down slowly, smoothly and consistently. And that is how a fluidized tripod head gives you smooth motion. To give you an idea of just how much difference the right tripod head can make, here's some footage that we shot using a ball and socket tripod head, which wasn't fluidized. And here's some footage that we took using a fluidized pan tilt tripod head. This footage is still a little shaky because we were zoomed in so far, but it makes a huge difference. So that's the tripod head. What about the tripod itself? Well, a couple of things that I really appreciate about our tripods is that they're sturdy, so they can keep the camera steady and don't wobble. This tripod doesn't have one, but the tripod that we're filming this video on has a bubble level on it, which is also really useful. It's also important that I can raise these tripods high enough that I can have the camera at a comfortable height and I'm not bending over while filming. A good camera, the right lenses, and the right tripod are the backbone of the kit that we use to film our highlight videos. But there are a lot of other small items that make our lives a lot easier. The first is a lens hood. This is a cone that clips to the front of your lens that shades the lens from direct sunlight. If you're filming toward the sun, you can get lens flares, which can be artistic, but generally they distract from the ultimate. Footage of that huge play isn't good if you can't see it past the lens flare. Putting on a lens hood will get rid of that lens flare most of the time. An added bonus is that if it's raining, sometimes a lens hood can reduce the amount of water splashing onto your lens, which means fewer water spots and less time spent wiping off your lens. Speaking of filming in the rain, if it's raining we don't want to get any of our gear wet. To protect our cameras we use these waterproof covers. These have holes for the tripod in your hands and a clear window to see the camera. To protect the rest of our camera gear we have these covers that we put all over our camera bags. If it's raining, you'll also need a raincoat and an umbrella and a towel to dry off your gear when it inevitably gets wet. We'll be talking more about filming in the rain when we get to video 5 in this series. The next thing on our list of bits and bobs is this guy here. This is something that you can't buy from a camera store. I call this the highlight clicker and I made it to make our lives a lot easier when we're making highlight videos. It mounts to one of the legs of the tripod and plugs into the camera's audio jack. When a highlight happens, I push one of these buttons and it marks a section of the clip so that I can find it when I'm editing the video. I'm not going to talk too much about this here because it might change in the future, so to get the latest on this, check out the additional resources linked in the description. Other things that you'll need for filming Ultimate are plenty of camera batteries and plenty of SD cards, because you'll be filming for a long time. You'll want at least 2 batteries so that you can be filming with one battery while you're charging the other, but generally the more batteries you have the better. In terms of the SD cards, the amount of card space you use depends a lot on what cameras you have and what settings you're using to film things, so my best advice is to film a bit and see how much storage space the footage takes up. In the past we've taken a laptop to the fields so that we can download the footage and free up card space during lunch breaks, so if you don't have enough card space or if you're not sure if you have enough card space, that could be an option. As well as all of the necessary camera gear, you'll also need the right equipment to edit your videos. The requirements for this will vary depending on how much footage you generate, which depends on your camera, settings, etc., and what software you use to edit your video. But as a general rule, you'll need a copy of whatever editing software you use, a computer that can run that software, and somewhere to put all of the footage. That could be the computer's hard drive if it's big enough, or it could be on an external hard drive like this one. Like I said before, you'll be generating a lot of footage, so make sure you have enough hard disk space to store all of it. Before we finish this video, I want to talk a little bit about some other cameras that you might be wondering about. Firstly, smartphone cameras. Smartphone cameras are great and they continue to get better and better, but in my opinion, a camera in a form factor like this will make it easier to generate good looking footage. Having said that, people often say that the best camera is the one that you have with you, and that does apply here. If you're going to try filming Ultimate with a smartphone, you're going to need a way of keeping the play large in the frame and a way of keeping the phone steady. You could put the camera on the tripod to keep it steady and then keep the play large in frame by zooming in, but if you're going to do that, I'd recommend figuring out a way of adjusting the zoom on your smartphone that doesn't shake the camera. Another approach you could take is to move up and down the sideline following the play, but if you're going to do that, you'll definitely need something like a gimbal to keep the camera steady. The other type of camera that I want to talk about is drones. Drones are a great way for getting an elevated view of the field and showing off the different tactics that are being played, but in my opinion, because they're often far away from the play and zoomed out, they're not great for filming highlights. Seeing a huge layout from above where the player is this big doesn't look as good as seeing the same layout where the player's body fills the frame. I'm not saying that smartphone and drone footage doesn't have a place in highlight videos, I'm just saying that you might find it easier to capture highlights with a DSLR style camera. And if you're only going to take one camera to the fields, I would strongly recommend picking something like this. There's definitely a time and place for other types of cameras though. For example, a drone shot of the fields can be a great way to start a video, and a smartphone might be a great way to film a spirit circle or a team cheer. That's it for this video. We've talked through the type of cameras and tripods that we use and all of the other pieces of equipment that we have on hand for filming Ultimate Frisbee. We also talked a bit about smartphones and drones. Don't forget to check out the links in the description for all the other resources and the addendums. In the next video, we'll be talking about what camera settings we use to capture Ultimate Frisbee highlights. See you then!